Hello, everyone, and welcome back to episode 3 of Replay Analysis with the Pros. Today, we have a very special guest who shouldn't need any introduction, really, but I'm going to introduce him anyway. It's Michael Hamilton, one-time World's Champion, U.S. Nationals Champion, and 5-time Calling Champion as well. Michael, how are you doing? How was your trip to London?
Hey, I'm doing great. I had a very good time in London. It was a long trip. I got there the Thursday before, or the Thursday the week before the Pro Tour started. So I was there for quite a while. Got to do a lot of testing in our little testing house, but had a lot of fun there. Didn't do so hot in either the Pro Tour or the calling, but that's that just happens sometimes. Part of playing games.
And I hear your testing house was full of killers. You were part of Team Armory, right? The Simon Nielsen testing team?
Yeah. The top secret Simon Nielsen testing team that I don't know how secret it was, but
Oh, yeah. No
it
one
was
knew
fun.
about it. Yeah, it literally wasn't the talk of the town at all.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
Well, congrats to the team for obviously, creating the Pro Tour champion for London. I'm sure you all were very, very stoked about that.
Yeah, for sure. I think Pablo's an incredible player and would have done quite well without our help, but I like to think that we played at least some part in him winning the tournament,
It's a
and we're all
team
very happy
victory.
for it.
Definitely take
Yeah.
credit. So I want to dive a little bit into your testing process. So you ended up on Arakni slip through the cracks, which I have to say I was very surprised by because normally I think people know you as the slower, more grindy type player. Like you enjoyed Oldham back in the day. Your Starvo you liked was the Control Starvo, CYB new, Icelander, obviously. So what brought you to Arachne slip through the cracks?
So one thing that is really important to me when playing decks is that I am capable of blocking well. And although I would describe Slippy as a fairly aggressive deck, if you look at the bottom right corner of his cards, I think 54 of them say 3 in the bottom right corner, and the 6 that don't are Codex of Frailty, which is just insane, and Pain in the Backside, which still quite a good card, ends up being a head jab a lot of the time, but it just does a lot of what you need in Slippy. So I think that despite being an aggressive deck, Slippy blocks extremely well and can be more flexible. I actually played against Vincent in the calling where I threatened to fatigue them a few turns and they had to take blood debt to set up. So then I ended up just killing them with damage. But because I was able to just block out so well, it led to me being able to like force them to take blood debt and set up pitch deck and stuff. But I can get into the whole story of how I ended up on Slippy if you want to hear that.
Yeah, I think we'd love that. And I say when
Yeah.
I say we,
So
I'm speaking for the viewers. Yes, viewers, you will love it too. I'm telling you, you will love it.
so with the armory, we decided that we were going to lock in and start serious testing in March before the Pro Tour, which I think the Pro Tour was early April. I don't actually remember exact dates, but we
April
didn't start
13th
serious.
was the Sunday, but yeah.
Okay,
Mhm.
okay, thank you. We started seriously locking in at the start of March, but I think I was basically traveling almost all of that time. I had an Alpha Clash tournament, and then I had Sao Paulo, and then I had Milwaukee, and then I was home for like 2 days before I had to leave for London after that. So I actually wasn't home for almost all of our planned testing time. And even before Sao Paulo, I didn't feel like I had gotten in great testing. I didn't know what to play in Sao Paulo. And Jacob Clements, he got second with New at Kobe. And he's like, you should play New. This deck's great. I think that you'll like it. You like New, and it's defensive. You can fatigue the Auroras, and it'll be great. And so I played New at Sao Paulo, and I did like the deck. I thought it was good, and I was planning to play it at the Pro Tour in London. And then cut to the testing house, which I got there Thursday morning. I got to London, and then the testing house kind of really started on Friday, really picked up, and played a lot of new games versus played against Florian. That matchup's hard but not unwinnable, and I had a pretty good plan into it, and it seemed fine. Played against Aurora a lot, and at first the matchup felt good as expected, less good than against a lot of Auroras that I had played against because the people in this testing house were just very, very good. And then Yuki was like, "Hey, I have this thought. What if we try this strategy into new?" And then we actually played 9 games of the matches. We had 6 people testing the matchup, 3 people playing the new side, 3 people playing the Aurora side, and we each like match played 3 games, and Aurora won 7 of them. So of the 9 games, Slippy won, or not Slippy, New won 2, Aurora won 7, and we're like, we could probably adjust to this. But the fact that Aurora is capable of doing something like this, the strategy that Yuki was implementing, means that like if Aurora adjusts and different teams are going to have different plans for their Auroras against New, and this plan is effective, I imagine that a lot of other players would find effective strategies to play Aurora to New. And even if they don't make the matchup 7-2 good, they would still be able to do things that we didn't expect and would make the matchup very tough. So I was like, huh, that's not great. And then after that happened, we're like, let's play some other matchups. The Aurora matchup is probably good against random Auroras that'll be at the Pro Tour. Maybe not as good as we thought before, but still probably favored. So played against played against Enigma. That's the other deck that's going to be really popular. And I can't remember if we had a single game that New beat Enigma in the testing house. We tried different things. Nothing seemed like it was working. The matchup's so hard. Actually, that's not true. We did win. We did win some games with the new deck, but Arthur was working on Enigma, and he brought Enigma to the Pro Tour, and his list didn't have that all you gots in it. And it seemed like when the Enigma wasn't on that all you got, it's like, okay, maybe this matchup's not that bad because your daggers actually like pressure a card or they leak things, or if your opponent discards shelter, you still have Van Brace to kind of get around it a little bit. And then, so I think we went 2-2 with Arthur's deck as new into Enigma, and then we switched to. I feel
Pablo's?
so bad. I can't remember his name. Not Pablo's list. The list that won Sao Paulo.
Florin?
Lauren's list, yeah.
Yes, Florin,
That
yeah.
just had that all you got in it, and could not beat that deck with new. That deck felt really strong. Just having the extra that all you got just really kind of slammed what was already a pretty, at least slightly Enigma favored matchup. It just kind of slammed the door on a lot of news outs where the daggers were now a huge liability every time you attacked with them. If they had that all you got, you just spend 2 resources and they negate it and draw a card.
Yeah, your story about new in testing is actually so similar to ours as well. Like in my testing team, we had Margin Bay and Easton Douglas who were very high on new, and they were going to play Jacob Clemens' list and your list as well. I mean, I guess it was the same list that you adopted.
It's,
And
it's Jacob's list. He he
yeah,
he gave it to me.
so they were going to play that, and then they were beating up our internal Auroras. And then the Auroras one day pivoted the strategy a little bit, and then they barely went against the Aurora again. And then they were like, "Oh, we can't play this anymore." And then Margin showed up to the PT on Verdance because of that. So yeah,
Yeah, and I played Slippy, so
yeah,
similar thing happened. So after that, I'm like, okay, maybe we'll give New one more shot. What's a random deck that we think might show up? And there were people talking about Fang, and I'm like, okay, let's just play a New against Fang deck a game. Why not? And that matchup also felt atrocious for New, where it didn't matter how much disruption you had, Fang would always just go. He'd get his 3 fealties online, and then he'd go dagger. And even if you took 3 of his cards away, he'd still be able to just play a react, swing the other dagger. And it didn't feel like you had enough to fatigue him, even if your deck was really defensive. And you didn't have enough pressure to strip enough of his cards to get rid of all the fealty, because to get enough cards to get rid of all the fealty, you had to get all of his cards in hand and his arsenal. And then at in Milwaukee, I actually played this matchup and I managed to win it. But there was one turn where I actually took all of his cards in hand and his card in arsenal, and then he banished 2 of the defense reaction loyalty from Beyond the Grave and drew a 0 cost react and still kept all his fealty.
oh no,
Uh, it's really hard to shut off their fealty engine. It's really hard to stop them from getting it, and Fang just has really good numbers if he's doing that every turn. And the fact that Dynamo blocks misplayed for free every turn just made it really hard to race as well.
yeah.
So
Okay, so you went a hole. New was turning out to be unplayable as you entered the testing house. So talk about how Slippy came into the conversation.
so during this March period where I was traveling most of the time, Simon posted a couple of results in our Discord of going like 3-1 against, I think, against Birdie's Azalea with Slippy, and then 2-1 against the Aurora with Slippy. And then he's like, it's probably just random chance or something. I don't know. He didn't seem like he took it very seriously anyway. So then I was thinking about new, and a lot of the games I lost, I would have Codex of Frailty in my hand, and I would have almost any card in my arsenal. Doesn't matter what it is. It's just any cards there. And I'm like, it'd be nice if I could cast Codex of Frailty. And
Yeah, been there.
instead, I just pitch it or block with it or whatever, and I'm just like, I can't do this anymore. This is the best card in my deck. Why am I not casting it when I draw it? So I was like, wait a second. There's a hero that has a solution to this. He can play Codex of Frailty and their stuff gets go again. And then uh, I was like, maybe I'll play a game with Slippy. And I play a game with Slippy, I think against Aurora, and the matchup feels really good just with like a stock. Not I don't want to say stock. It wasn't really stock because Chris Ciali had won the AGE Open with Slippy. Or no, he won that during the weekend. The weekend before, Luke Magnuson had won the
A
ProQuest
PQ
Plus with
plus.
Slippy. That's
Yeah.
yeah, that was the start of it. And I looked at his list, and I don't remember if he had toxicity in it, but I knew that's not what I wanted to be doing. But he had Spike with Blood Rots in it, which I ended up not wanting to play either. And I think there were Codex of Blood Rots too. And I'm like, these cards require a lot of things to go right. What if we just play some? What if we just play the cards that almost always work, that don't ask that much of your deck? So I had a lot of Mark of the Black Widows, which I ended up cutting. But then I also just wanted to play Saber Bloodshed because I think it's one of the strongest cards in honestly the game. It's a 0/4 go again that draws a card and blocks 3.
Yeah, the lack of red Mark of the Black Widow was definitely something I noticed in your list as well, which I think was a very, very interesting innovation. And of course, I think at least your team's Arakni list, was the first time we saw Saber Bloodshed in Slip Through the Cracks, which I completely agree with you. I think that card is amazing. I actually tried to make it work in new for quite a while, like with a Hunter's Clave new build. But yeah, I think that card is absolutely amazing. So coming back to the Aurora matchup, since that is what we will be watching today, that is what we'll be going over. We'll be going over your game against Pudding Tom in round 2 of Pro Tour London. How do you feel like the matchup is favored for you?
So the first few games I played against Auroras in the testing house, well, I played against Michael Fung playing Aurora, and he would draw his hand and it'd have 1/3 block in it, or one total 3 block, and the rest of his cards couldn't block 3. So I'd attack with a stealth card. He'd be like, I don't know, put a 3 block in front of it. I'm like, okay, Razor's Edge my thing. Attack with another 3 power stealth card and be like, no blocks. I'm like, no blocks. And he's like, yeah, I can't block it. And I'm like, oh, okay, take 3, do this really impactful on hit trigger like Infiltrate or Infect or Art of Desire Body, all these very powerful on hit effects. And I think that as Auroras fill their deck with more 3 blocks and are more able to block out just Slippy's normal turns, I think the matchup isn't quite as good for Slippy. But even playing against lists that had that more in mind and sideboarded specifically playing every 3 block they could, I still felt like the matchup felt reasonably favored for Slippy, and that's ultimately what led to me playing Slippy at the PT. That, and he's a lot of fun.
Yeah, and he's also favored into Enigma, right? Which I'm sure was also part of your consideration.
I
Okay,
actually felt less confident about the Enigma matchup than the Aurora matchup. I think that by the time I just assumed that Slippy would be quite good into Enigma because everything has go again. He is picked to pieces. And then when I actually played the matchup, I'm like, this is probably like close to 50-50. But I was already pretty locked on Slippy at that point after beating up the Auroras. And I think that if I had an extra week, I likely would have registered Enigma at the PT. I think she was just the best deck.
Yeah, I think a lot of people were coming around to that as well. And I think the top 8 also sort of like speaks for itself on that front. Cool. All right. Well, thank you so much for walking us through how you landed up on Slippy. Going to be very interesting to see how that actually gets executed in your game against Pudding. So let's go ahead and get right into that. Okay, and now we're in the gameplay part of your game, Michael. And a little bit of a note for the viewers. Unfortunately, the start of this game was slightly cut off. So we missed Michael Hamilton's first turn, which was his turn 0. What happened was he sent a Command and Conquer, and Pudding ended up leaking 2 damage after that. It was an infect into Command and Conquer. Pudding ended up leaking 2 damage, and now we're looking at Pudding's first turn of the game, and he's the player going second.
Yeah. So I could just talk about my plan into Aurora first. Does that make sense
Yeah,
while
yeah,
this
let's do
game's
that.
going? Or should I? Okay, so I mostly just want to race. I think that if the game goes super long, that Aurora is going to leak a lot of damage because you're not good at blocking arcane damage. So I want to race. I have very impactful on hits that can be worth like significantly more value than any one card in Aurora can even get. Even like hitting with an infiltrate is like probably more value than playing a Channel Lightning Valley, for example.
Right. So now opponent has started with Entwine Lightning, and they fused with the current funnel, and you just
Yep.
declared no blocks. I guess you're just holding on to that all you got and just hoping that they would, yeah, swing the Starfall, right? Which is exactly what they're doing here.
Yeah. So the if they don't swing the star, like I would like to block with the CNC this turn because
You,
ideally, if I'm using my that all you got to block a starfall, then I don't have resources for the CNC. So I do want to block with the CNC, but I expect more stuff will come, so I don't want to block the Entwine Lightning right away.
yeah. So in your testing, were your Auroras playing off an Arsenal a lot because you're an assassin player and you have a lot of Arsenal disruption, and so that's sort of why you're expecting that your opponent's going to end off an Arsenal. And aside from the resource thing, you also maybe want to prioritize blocking the CNC a little bit.
Well, I don't know if they'll be off an Arsenal all the time. A lot of the time, they'll Arsenal like D-reacts or something. But the problem is if they have a D-react that they want to Arsenal, I'm going to attack with my stealth card, and then I'm going to want to Razor's Edge it, and that'll just draw the D-react from their Arsenal anyway.
Right, right.
So CNC just isn't going to hit that often.
Mm-hmm. And over here, okay, so your dad only got drew up a Razor's Edge, and we've got Infiltrate in your arsenal. Now, Razor's Edge, of course, can't be played on Pain in the backside. What are you looking to arsenal on this turn? Are you looking to arsenal? Like, obviously, you're going to play one of these Razor's Edges, probably. Yeah, you have to play one of them. Are you looking to arsenal the other Razor's Edge or the Pain in the backside? Like, which card do you value more, like, for which situation?
So I talked about when I switched to Slippy, I want to be able to cast Codex Frailty every time I draw it. Razor's Edge could stop me from casting it. Pain in the Backside cannot stop me from casting Codex Frailty. So Pain in the Backside is the card I want to put in my arsenal.
Oh my god, that honestly that explains a lot because I was watching this footage obviously before we got on this call, and I was wondering why you played both Razor's Edges here. But that makes a lot of sense. The whole Codex of Fealty thing. Despite you don't have a Leave No Witnesses in your yard right now, you just have a Command and Conquer. But Tunic's coming up, so if you draw Codex with a blue, you can go ahead and do the classic Dagger Codex Tunic CNC line.
And even Codex for Infect or Infiltrate, it's three they have to block and then it draws me a card. It's good enough.
Okay, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And an opponent goes ahead and puts 4 block of armor onto your infiltrate, and you still get the on hit, so you definitely consider that a massive win over here.
Yeah, and hitting the shelter is great. It's worth 4 value and it's not going to cost me an action point, which a lot of the time things will cost you an action point. But if I hit a 0 for 4 here, since I don't really this infiltrate has go again, I could just play it out this turn. But hitting shelter is great too.
Yeah, so infiltrate and Slippy against Aurora is kind of always a 0 for 7 unless they block it out, which is probably part of the reason why you felt this matchup was pretty good for you.
Yeah, it's a big part of that. The other part of the it being a good matchup, I think we'll get to is the Mask of Perdition with Art of Desire Body is very powerful as well.
Oh yeah, that definitely did happen in this game. A bit of a spoiler alert for our viewers.
Yeah.
Okay, and I was curious about this turn cycle as well. I want to talk about Shred, the yellow Shred in particular. How highly do you value that card in this matchup? Because are you expecting your opponent to even block you that much, given that they're an aggro deck and they're going to try and race you?
I think they will block a decent amount of the time. When when I was testing in the house, a lot of the time they'd want to put a 3 block in front of these 3 power stealth cards because even if the Slippy has a reaction like a decent amount of the time to push it over, the times that they don't, it's just worth so much more than 3 to block out one of these stealth cards. So I think that I don't think the shred is like particularly amazing to keep. It is nice to have the threat of it, and they will block a decent amount, and they should block a decent amount. So
Okay. And then on that first chain link, I mean, it was in Twine Lightning. You just had your opponent's shelter. Obviously, it's very easy to cover that up because you don't know what
yeah,
else is happening. And then over here, you're
yeah,
lining up
I
your
want to make
blocks. Yeah, go on.
I want to make sure I can cast it in case they play like an exude or something. I'll lead on shelter, get it out of the way.
For sure. And yeah, so over here you're blocking with your Mark or the Black Widow. You're choosing to keep the Shred instead of that being your first card. So, I mean, coming back to a comment about Codex of Frailty, if your opponent doesn't give you a chance to use the Shred, then you're kind of forced to Arsenal, and that can be a very, very risky place to be in, right? But I guess you're just you're taking a bit of a gamble here by holding on to Shred. Just
Yeah, so it's actually kind of interesting because right now, if my opponent has an attack to follow up this second strike, then I expect they'll play it. So I actually have a read that this last card is if it's an attack, then I can just block with the shred on it. And if it's not an attack, then it's probably a defense reaction going in Arsenal because I feel like Arc Lightning probably would have got cast this turn since it's hard to keep a bunch of cards against Slippy. Channel definitely would have been cast this turn. So I just have a read that it's a defense reaction and that the shred will just trade for the defense reaction.
right, that makes a lot of sense. Yeah, because I think also so far it's just only been a couple of turns, but it does seem like Pudding wants to avoid arsenaling in a sense. He's not trying to say like I'm going to set up this go again card for in case I draw Channel Lightning Value or Burn Up Shock. He's saying I just want to get all my cards out and stay off an arsenal so he doesn't get juiced by arsenal disruption. At least that's so far what it seems like. Is that something you were feeling during the game?
Yeah, I think just like also in general, when Aurora has an action point, they they probably should just send the 0 for 4 rather than Arsenal it. Even if like I don't know, like against Flippy where you have some Arsenal disruption, that's like especially true. But a lot of the time, Aurora can get clunked on action points, and like just wasting an action point one turn can increase the odds that that happens.
So, for example, suppose Pudding had a lightning surge there. You would expect him to follow up the second strike with a lightning surge instead of arsenaling it, even though lightning surge is kind of just freely played from Arsenal.
Yeah, maybe Lightning Surge is like the one exception, but even like an Entwine Lightning or something like that, I would expect him to play because it's like a little bit conditional. Lightning Surge being a Lightning starter to turn on your Starfall is maybe enough that it's correct to Arsenal even against Slippy, but
Okay.
most attacks I would expect.
Right. And then over here, you start with our Desire Body, and your opponent, as you rightly predicted, just had Siege of Suffering in the arsenal, but your Tunic is up. So it feels like a fairly easy just activate Tunic instead of pitching the Shred.
Yeah, it's actually kind of reasonable to just take the 1 damage here because it's worth 2, but there's not like a channel or something in play. And if Pudding has another D-React to cover up this Art of Desire, then it's actually only the 1 damage that I'm taking that I'm saving by using my Tunic there. So I think
Right.
the cost is not, or it wouldn't be that expensive to keep my Tunic counter insulate me against future channels.
That makes sense. Yeah, it would just be just the 1 point because he did have the defense reaction here. But I guess I don't know. It's a bit hard to make that call when all he's done is play the Siege of Suffering, right?
Mm-hmm.
So okay, so talk to me about not playing Pain in the Backside. Like, talk to me about keeping that in your arsenal. Like, are you trying to set that up with something in particular, or what's going on there?
Yeah, it's a great enabler for Saber Bloodshed. Um, if you play if you play Pain in the Backside on a turn where the mark actually matters, it can also enable Take Up the Backside or,
Take up the mantle. Yep.
or Pain in the Backside. Pain in the Backside.
Yeah.
No, it can enable Take Up the Mantle. Sorry.
Yep.
It's just nice to have that on a turn. Also, the way Pudding blocked that turn, he blocked with 2 D-Reacts, so it's still possible he has another card in his hand that he would prefer to block with. For example, the Skizix that he's attacking with. So there's not really a reason for me to send this 3 power attack when he might have an inefficient card that he'd prefer to block with this turn.
Mm-hmm. And it does seem like that's exactly like your read was completely correct. It does seem like he was a little bit bricked. He's starting with the Skizix, so this is pretty much a telegraph snaps play.
Yep.
And looking at your hand and your arsenal, what are you thinking for the line in this hand?
So one other thing that's nice about Pain in the Backside is you can flick on it if you draw something that needs your opponent to be marked. You can play it and then always flick and like have that mark happen first and open that empty slot for an Orb Weaver. So because I have this Orb Weaver, I am extra happy that I have the Pain in the Backside of my arsenal because I can use it and then flick a dagger and then play the Orb Weaver. And then unless I have a reason to block, I'm pretty happy to play both Infiltrate and use Double Trouble and take up the mantle on the Double Trouble turn into something else. So right now, I would prefer to not block. um, and force either putting to block or have to deal with these really impactful on hits.
Yeah, I mean, especially if pudding is just sending vanilla damage at you, then yeah, you can just be like, cool. Like this isn't burn up shock. It isn't. So yeah, it can't be snatch at this point, and obviously CLV can't be that either. So that makes a lot of sense. You are sort of falling down on life total though, but you haven't resolved a single codex, and I imagine that is one of the cards you look to make up any life deficit that ends up happening.
Yeah, I am definitely behind on life, but pudding's blocked with uh, 4 armor with of equipment, and working through that's something that I'm going to have to do eventually. And I haven't resolved bonds, I haven't resolved codex, I haven't resolved saber bloodshed. I just haven't played any of my power cards yet, so that's kind of expected. The infiltrate that hit the shelter was great, but yeah, and I'm down 13 life, but I have a 5 card hand that's probably going to be worth at least 13, so I'm not feeling too concerned about the life total. I start down 2 life also.
Of course. Talk to me about blue double trouble. Like, why did this make the list over, say, maybe blue backstab because of how defense react heavy the entire world is right now, or at least at the time of the PT?
I think that blue double trouble is just so it's kind of funny. You can actually counter fatigue some of these more defensive decks if you hit them with 1 or 2 blue double troubles. Because banishing 2 cards is a lot. It's a great nick target. Um, because it attacks for 8 versus backstab 6 when you nick it and you play another react on it. And with flick knives and all our dagger rebuy against the slower decks, it's not too hard to have an extra dagger lying around to flick.
Mm-hmm.
And it just consistently was getting 2 more points than whatever other blue stealth card we had.
Okay.
And
Uh,
actually we ended up playing 2 blue double trouble and 2 blue mark of the black widows for this event, but in the calling I actually switched one of the blue mark of the black widows for a third blue double trouble. Blue
you know,
double trouble seemed very good.
I have to say, Blue Mark for Black Widow has felt more and more awkward, like, the more you play with it. Because there's only so many times you can flick your opponent, right? Unless your retrieve lines up exactly. And you kind of want to save those for stronger plays, like take up the mantle and save a bloodsheds, rather than Mark of the Black Widow, is kind of what I found. Is that similar to, like, what to your philosophy and why you cut that card?
Yeah, and that's actually also why I cut the red one too, was because I attack with the red one. They were like, no blocks, and I'm like, okay, flick my dagger, and they're like, play sync blow, and I'm like, I wish I had that dagger back.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, they discard shelter to your flick, and you're like, okay, like that.
Yeah, though that's gonna get you always, but then at least the other stealth cards have a relevant on hit if they discard shelter to the dagger, so they still have to block it with the card, or are encouraged to block it with the card.
Exactly. So here you go. Yep, here you go, double trouble, and this still has go again because your first action was pain in the backside, which was not a stealth card, just normally had go again. I want to talk a little bit about Calicera. How, like, obviously the setup of Hunter's Slave plus Calicera is a very, very strong setup. Is that something you're looking to get into, like, as soon as possible? Because your take of the mantle here is fine, right? It's not like a bonds. It's gonna be infiltrate, which is still strong. But yeah, it seems like you still went for the flick line. Is this Clave Calicera setup something that you try to get to pretty early on in the game if you can?
Yeah, I almost always will try to set up the Clave Calicera if I have a window to and I draw the Orb Weaver. I think that it's just really strong. And in the world that you eventually just flick this Graphene, then the Orb Weaver is kind of a 0 for 4 go again, because you're getting 1 damage out of the flick and then 3 damage out of the +3, and that's a great deal. I also really like having a Graphene in play to set up Codex CNC lines where you can pitch a blue to Graphene, have 2 floating. It always has go again. Or if it's your first stealth attack of the turn, it has go again because of Arakni's ability. So pitching a blue to attack with Graphene, playing a Codex, getting back a CNC, and sending the CNC is just a clean 2-card hand.
That's definitely something I think a lot of people sometimes forget about the Calicera and slip through the cracks. They'll be like, oh, no, you need to mark them. It's like, nah, you really don't if it's like your first one.
Yeah.
The infiltrate hit was really funny over here because you banish CLV off the top, which is kind of like instead of drawing a card from your opponent's deck, you're just going to draw a card from your deck on the following turn because your flick knives is sort of guarantee it. So that was pretty interesting.
Yeah, it's kind of awkward that if I don't want to flick a knife, and my opponent is happy to block, I kind of have to get the card out of the CLV. But it's still good. It's nice to have.
All right.
And then
So
Pudding's attacking here, pitching a channel, and this is most likely just another channel in his hand because if you'd pitch discharge to do this if you had discharge instead. So what other lightning instant would it be? So it, I kind of look at my hand and I'm like, I don't think I can block if you have any real follow up with like 0 for 4 go against because all my cards block 3. So I just feel like I have to let him get the channel draw here.
that makes sense. And I think that's something a lot of people need to sort of get more used to when they play against Aurora. It's like they see the channel and they're like, oh my god, and their alarms go off and it use all their armor to block on the first few chain links. And then the on hit goes through in the end anyway. And then they just use all their armor for nothing. And like used and gave up all the tempo for the on hit to only go through in the end. And then opponent plays a snatch over here.
Yeah, it doesn't have go again. So
Exactly.
it's almost certain that one of his 2 cards is a lightning press. And because otherwise he would have either attacked with something with go again first or just pitched something to make an embodiment of lightning. I guess it's not 100% he could have or he has to have lightning press here. He could just end on embodiment and arsenal as last card. But I think lightning press is the most likely thing here. So I have a kind of difficult decision where I could overblock for 6 with 2 of these attacks. Or 2 of these cards, since I know I'm going to be drawing a card with channel next turn. I don't want to have too many finishers with like multiple leave no witnesses. But ultimately, I don't think it's not guaranteed he has a lightning press, and I think that if I ever block 6 on this and he doesn't have it, it's just so bad for me. So I just end up blocking 3 here. I'm
Got it.
pretty sure I end up blocking 3 here.
Yeah. I think you do too. I think goes and presses it, which is pretty telegraphed. But yeah, this is the outcome you're happy with. Now, I guess when it comes to the CLV draw, yeah, that does sort of put a bit of a. And actually, you can see if you can convert all the current 4 cards in hand that you have right now. Well, 3 cards in hand, 1 in arsenal. Then the CLV draw doesn't matter like what it is, right? And it does seem like you are able to convert
Yeah,
all 4 of the
yeah,
cards.
that's true. That's true.
Mm-hmm. Cool.
Yeah, I have to pitch the persuasive to do this to convert all the cards, which persuasive pitches for 2 basically, because it's 1 damage off Hunter's Clave, 1 damage off the Graphene. But so I would rather block 3 with it if I knew it was 100% a lightning press.
Got it. Yeah, right. Because if you overblock and it's not a press, then you just get 1 value out of it. Okay, yeah. So you sort of took a
maybe
hedge.
it's a press often enough that it's correct to block with it. I'm not exactly positive.
Mm-hmm.
I could see it being a press often enough that it's correct to block with it, making sense.
Right. Yeah, because if it's not a press, then you still get 1 value out of it. But if it is a press, you get 3. But you sort of took the middling line where you get 2, right? It's kind of just took the average of both the possibilities. So
Yeah.
which is interesting.
And then this line also kind of lets me lead on the infiltrate before I do anything else because now I know I'll have a stealth attack for this Orb Weaver pump after I flick the Graphene because I'll have a second Graphene or I'll make a new Graphene and then have the blue to attack with it.
Right. But that won't
So
have go again though.
it will
Right.
if he's marked. So my plan right now is flick the Graphene, then attack with the Hunter's Clave for 1 go again, and then play the Orb Weaver, and then hopefully the Hunter's Clave hits. If it doesn't hit, that means he blocked 2 on it, which is a full card, which I'm also happy with.
Okay. Yep. That makes sense. And then you've of course got his CLV over here, so you do exactly play the CLV and then you flick the Graphene over here. And we're about to get into a bit of a judge call. We have edited that part out. But when the gameplay comes back, it'll be just slightly forward, so just a heads up for the viewers. The judge call is regarding the Callistra token, whether it goes to the graveyard or not.
Yeah, so I talked about not playing Slippy before or very much beforehand, and I thought Graphene just went to your graveyard, but they're token cards, so they can't actually go in your graveyard. So, or they don't, when they would go to your graveyard, they're removed from the game, and I I didn't know that. So I had been retrieving Callistras in playtesting, and it's very fortunate I found out so early in the Pro Tour how my card works.
You heard it here first, folks. Michael Hamilton cheats in the testing house. So you have drawn Take Up the Mantle of the Channel Lightning value, and you opted to just play it over here, which I guess, makes sense, right? Your only other target would be the Persuasive in your hand, which is not going to be a great target for it, because it's be +2, which is just like, if Pudding puts a 3 block in front of it as a defense reaction, that's like terrible.
Yeah. Yeah. Wait, sorry, can you say that again?
So you drew Take Up the Mantle off your Channel Lightning
Yeah.
Valley draw, and you just went ahead and played it on the Infiltrate because your other option, your only other target would have been the Persuasive. Like if you chose not to pitch the Persuasive, which would be a terrible target for it, right? Or I guess you could go ahead and Arsenal it. So actually, yeah, do you want to talk about why you chose to play the Take Up the Mantle there?
Yeah, so even though it's only getting 2 value, the value of the on hit for infiltrate is so high that I imagine that it's either going to trade for a D-react or get me 2 value plus the infiltrate on hit, which is worth 3 to 4 depending on what you hit. So it either trades for a D-react or goes +5 or 6 or something. So I'm pretty happy to take my +5 or trade with the D-react.
Mm-hmm. And then you definitely weren't
And
happy to see the Scissors of Suffering. Sorry, go on.
yeah, the sigil of suffering. Obviously, ideally the infiltrate hits, but the fact that it trades for a D-react is fine here. Sigil being the best one for putting, which just means that I won't have the one resource floating to attack with the graphene after this hunter's clave hits. Um, but I have to pitch. I have to stop. I have to AV this because of the channel lightning valley means that if I don't, it's a full card. So that's not really an option. And because I drew the Take Up the Mantle, now I can just arsenal the Graphene Maker, the Orb Weaver, and be happy to have it next turn. And I'll even have a Tunic available, so if I need to attack with the Graphene next turn, I can use the Tunic to do so.
So rewinding back to the previous turn when you decided on your blocks whether to play around Lightning Press or not, part of that was sort of hedging that you can convert the rest of your hand regardless of what you draw off CLV. But it was pretty fortunate that because of the Surge of Suffering, you could no longer go for the swing Graphene line. So it was pretty fortunate that you managed to get something that converted on that turn, right? So you could actually Arsenal the Spinneret.
Yeah.
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 Okay.
So, yeah, I think that if I had it over, it actually ended up very fortunate that I didn't overblock, even though he had Lightning Press, because being able to cash this Persuasive in for saving 1 life and stopping the card draw and letting me swing this Hunter's Clave for 1. Yeah,
Right.
it was very good for me.
So we just saw the skip happen there.
There.
We moved past the judge call. What Pudding did was block your Hunter's Clave with his remaining block in Carapace and Grasp of the Arknight. So blocking 2 because Clave has piercing. And then you play the Leave No Witnesses and Pudding just cashed in Crown of Providence to save his arsenal. Looks like you banished Arcanic Shockwave off the top. Just catching everyone up on what happened there.
Yeah, and now I'm feeling quite ahead in this game because while it is 14 to 20 and Pudding has 3 cards, he has no armor left, and I have a card in arsenal, 4 cards in hand. So I'm feeling pretty good about this.
Yeah, so you see
My
he has 3 cards, except he also has a CLV on the field, so potentially 4 cards. I mean, you are sort of forced to block out when you don't have a defense reaction, or you let him have the card draw. So what are you thinking looking at this hand?
Yeah, so I want to cash in my Mask of Perdition next turn on my Art of Desire body. So I'm happy to block with it here, and I have more than enough stealth attacks here that I don't need them. So I'm happy to block with a 3 block in that and stop the first attack. I imagine that he'll get the card draw this turn eventually because again I don't have a D-react. Though when this rabble hits a yellow, I'm like, oh, maybe we can block out his
Yeah,
channel.
the
So
rebel
I,
hitting a yellow is super fortunate.
if this rabble was for 4, I'm pretty sure I would just no blocks it and just let it happen. Because right now I want to play my Orb Weaver, attack with Art of Desire body, and use my hat to draw 2 cards. And assuming that he blocks the Art of Desire body because he sees I have the hat available, um, the shred will be turned on. So I'd be happy to just not block this and basically keep all the cards.
Right. Except that his last card's a snatch now, and that's probably just too much value, right? Because you know the top card's a yellow, which means you know he'll draw 2 and able to convert one of them to an embodiment. Oh, wait, no, he hasn't played a lightning card, actually. So you don't actually care about
Yeah,
the card 2. Yeah.
yeah, he hasn't played a lightning card, but I'm not going to attack his arsenal. I don't really want this Arc Lightning to be in his arsenal this turn. So even though the Snatch on hit is, or the Snatch and the Channel on hit are redundant, it's still on hit draw a card, which is very good. So
Yeah.
I think I want to block this, and I'm deciding between blocking, if I should block with Flick Knives or Tunic. And I said this, I think, before we were live that I bored out my upsticks and runs against Aurora. So I'm thinking, I'm like, okay, I've used 2 of my Orb Weaver spinnerets. Do I really need this Flick Knives? And this is basically inexperienced with Slippy that I think I should always be blocking Tunic here rather than Flick Knives if I'm gonna block, and that's because I still have 3 Kiss of Death left in my deck.
Right. Yes, that makes a lot of sense. Okay.
So I do decide to block this, and I believe if I'm remembering correctly, I block with Flick Knives instead of
You,
Tunic, but
yeah,
I
you
think I
do.
should be blocking with Tunic.
Interesting. Okay, that's fascinating. Yeah, the Kiss of Death makes a lot of sense. But also, I mean, the value of Tunic, we already saw that earlier with the Sigil of Suffering, right? So I think it's a tough call, but yeah. But
Yeah.
you would say you
What?
value the Kiss of Death flick more.
Yeah, the Kiss of Death flick is really important. And then the other side of this is that Pudding has resolved one channel. I've resolved one of his channels, and he pitched the third channel, and he hasn't shuffled since he pitched it. So there isn't. It's not very likely that he channels me, which is when Tunic gets the most value is when it's stopping a channel draw from like a sigil, for example. So I don't think it's very likely that he channel sigils me before the game ends. And because of that, that's even more reason that I don't need the Tunic as much.
Makes sense. It's always so valuable looking back these games and seeing like what you could have done better. Like spoiler, like this game does go your way, but is obviously like it's still great to be able to find ways to improve looking back, and that's exactly why we do these, right? There was one thing I wanted to ask you about how highly do you value Bonds of Agony in this matchup? Because you sort of had a line, you would need to let him draw, but you had a line where you hold Shred, and between Flick Knives and you get to flick the Callisto, between Flick Knives and Mask of Perdition, you can turn on Bonds of Agony. As long as your opponent blocks, so you can play your Shred. But that's not a line you chose to go for, you opted for the Art of Desire body. Can you talk to us a little bit about how highly you value Bonds of Agony in this matchup?
Yeah, I think the simple answer to why I wanted to block with Bonds of Agony is if he doesn't block my bonds with a card, I can't actually turn it on. So I can go flick and mask, and then it's still just one, and that's a one card one, and that's really bad. And he has 20 life. It's not like he's at a point where he has to block the bonds. He can just let it happen. So I didn't want to attack with bonds for that reason there.
So, I guess in an alternate universe, if the Shred was a Razor's Edge instead, would you have gone for the Bonds line, or would you have stuck with this Art of Desire
If it was a
body?
Nick, I would have gone for the bonds line because Nick on bonds is a 2 card 9 if bonds is turned on, and then you also get the disruption. But Razor's Edge, I'm not sure about.
Okay.
One thing that I really like about Nick Bonds, other than it's just like a lot of damage, is it's like the combo that it costs your opponent the most to play around because 9 is just so much. But Razor's Edge getting to 7, they can put a 3 block on it, and if you just react it up to 7 and they have a D-react, it stops you. So it's a lot more risky to go for it when you don't have the Nick.
And just now, we sort of skipped past this. Pudding did block 6 on your buffed up Art of Desire. And then he just sent Scar for Scar with no go again, so telegraphed he's going to Arsenal the Arc Lightning that we know is there. Because, yes, that we know is there.
Yeah.
And you just sank on the sink, and you sank away that all you got, and you drew up Tarantula Toxin. Which, as far as power cards go, and there's also one of those cards, one of the power cards you haven't quite seen yet. Although, maybe less of a power card if your opponent doesn't want to block too much, but it is getting to a point where you haven't seen Kiss of Deaths yet, as you pointed out. And you have a Kalishra setup, which is very, very strong with Toxin as your opponent gets lower and lower.
Yeah, and Toxin is really nice here because I can use my mask here confidently that even if putting D-reacts, I have Tarantula Toxins to force through this Art of Desire.
And he passes,
And
so he's out of defense reactions, which is really good for you because he's super likely to just get 2 reds off the top.
and I get 2 reds, which means I get to gain 2 life and draw 2 cards, which is extremely powerful.
Yeah, so I would say up until this point, it did feel like the game was maybe roughly even, or I guess to your point, you said you felt slightly ahead, but I think this is sort of the beginning of the turning point, right? Is what you said, where you've taken away all his armor, and then now you're on his like Art of Desire body, which feels like such an innocuous card is suddenly like super, super online. Okay, and then you draw a Toxin and an Infect. What are you thinking with this one?
So I'm realizing that if I kept the Flick Knives also, it helps turn on these bonds that I still have in my deck, and I'm like, that's another reason I probably should have kept the Flick Knives. I also don't think I've seen a Saber Bloodshed this game either, so I'm like, really like, I really should have kept the Flick Knives, I think. But I just want to convert my hand now, and I can do that by pitching the bonds to attack with the 2 daggers. I can Toxins one of the daggers, either one, for 3 more value.
And then putting Snap blocks your Hunter's Clave, which is, I mean, and we've seen him be very disciplined with not letting himself get marked. Like when he also put 2 pieces of armor to stop himself getting marked. And And you don't really have a mark payoff in his hand either. But you go ahead and resolve this toxin anyway on this clave. So I guess in your mind, why are you valuing the mark here that highly to play this toxin?
So to play the toxins, I either need to attack with another dagger if I'm not going to use it here, or he needs to block my infiltrate, or not infiltrate, sorry, my infect. He didn't block Art of Desire Body when I was representing the mask. So I have a read that he has no 3 blocks in his hand. So now I can't attack with the Graphene if this doesn't hit because it won't have go again. So I basically need to cast this Tarantula Toxins here and convert it for 3 value.
Okay. Follow. And then infect here, natural, and then you're gonna go ahead and Arsenal Toxin. I guess if your opponent blocks here, would you play Toxin here?
Yeah, for sure. It's worth 5 to play
Five's
it here
fine.
if he blocks with a 3 block.
Mm-hmm.
So I would happily play it. I feel a lot better about Arseling Toxin than Shred because it can always attack with a dagger and Toxin the dagger. And again, I also still haven't seen any of my 3 Kiss of Deaths, which is another great thing to use Tarantula Toxins on.
Yeah, because it is one of those cards that you can just never block. Like when the assassin sends that at you, like unless you have to, because you're gonna die from it, it's just too hard to block. Now Pudding did, we knew he had the Arc Lightning there from the Ravenous Rabble reveal, and has 3 remaining cards to go ahead and make use of this. Now you've drawn a bit of a defensive. Actually, hold on, you've drawn no attacks here, but you do have a sink below, and at that all you got. So
Yeah, and Saber Bloodshed, again, another reason I wish I had just the neck, or not just the neck, sorry. I wish I had Flick Knives, but it is quite good, especially with Tarantula Toxins in my arsenal. I'm very likely to get the draw off the Saber Bloodshed this turn. If I have resources to play it, at least.
right, but your
So,
opponent isn't marked, so
yeah, so if I have the yellow to swing the Hunter's Clave, I still have my Tunic, which that is a good reason I still have it, even though I kind of wish I didn't. Um, yeah, for now, I'm going to sink just the neck because I don't have a target for it. And even if I had a blue, I'd probably want to use the blue to play for the daggers, even if I draw a blue. So.
And then you did draw blue, so you're kind of hoping he swings Starfall here. But
Yeah.
I don't believe he does. Well, actually, it turns out to be a fairly strong turn from Pudding over here. Getting to bounce has Gone in a Flash. It was looking like a 3-card hand, but it actually ends up being 4 cards because Gone in a Flash bounce. So that's pretty cool. All right, so yeah, okay. So now he sends Gone in a Flash again, and this is for 7. Uh, I guess if you are expecting that you're going to get a draw from Saber Bloodshed over here, are you looking to spend that all you got right now? So that no matter what
Yes.
you draw? Yeah.
Yeah, so then no matter what I can draw, then I'm able to arsenal whatever I draw. But if I draw like an attack reaction, a defense reaction, or a Codex of Frailty, having this that all you got will just result in me basically losing a card.
Yeah.
So I
Yep.
want to just convert it to 3, and then whatever I draw is safe. I would have much rather blocked a Starfall with it, but Pudding didn't give me that opportunity. So
Yeah.
happy to
So,
just play it on this Gone in a Flash here.
yeah, instead he's sending 10. So, yeah, you kind of definitely almost forced to use that all you got. Now, I do also want to point out the deck size from Pudding's side is accidentally, in a sense, or incidentally fatiguing Aurora, something that you found happens with Slippy.
I have not done it yet. I have not fatigued an Aurora with Slippy yet, but I think that if Aurora decks were better at blocking, that could be an avenue that you could pursue as like an alternate win condition. Especially if they're bringing in even more D-reacts, like I think Pudding had around 6. I'm not sure his exact number, but it felt like around 6. Like sigils and shelters, I think.
I think
Maybe
so.
sync.
I don't think
I
we
think
saw
it's
any
just sigil and
sinks.
shelter.
Yeah, it looked like it was just sigils and shelters. And once again, yeah, Pudding just blocking your mark, which I'm guessing you're probably just really happy with, right? Maybe spending a whole card.
Actually, this turn I'd really like this to hit because I want to play Saber Bloodshed and then attack with this Graphene for 5 on hit draw with the Tarantula Toxins in
with
my
Toxin
arsenal.
setup. Yeah, that makes sense.
But instead, I have to use it here because I need to mark him so that my Graphene threatens to draw a card off Saber Bloodshed.
Yep.
I guess I don't need to, but I think it's worth it to do so.
Yeah, for sure. Especially, yeah, so now he's down to 7, so you're sending 5 draw cards. So it's like he has to block it, otherwise you're going to most likely draw a way to send lethal.
Yeah. And there are Aurora hands that can't block 5 here.
For sure, yeah, just like 2/2 blocks in an instant, right? Um,
Yeah.
and something I
Or three
really
two
like,
blocks. I'd say that I can't really block five, but I guess I
yeah,
can.
something I really like about the mark condition, as I was like experimenting with mark new and stuff, is like unlike Spider's Bite, it's like the condition kind of just stays in them because you're sending on hits that they want to block out anyway. So you're talking about how you haven't seen any Saber Bloodsheds. Well, this is your first one. And if your opponent stays marked because they don't give you the draw, well, you're probably going to see your next one soon, and then you just keep threatening it until they let you have the draw. So that's really, really cool. Also, Take Up the Mantle is still cards. I think you still have one left in your deck. Yeah, you still have one.
Yeah, that sounds right. And again, I do really wish I had the flick knives here. Could just flick this Hunter's Clave, draw a card. It'd be great. But we got this tunic sitting here looking nice with 3 counters on it.
So I'm actually curious about it. So if you had Flick Knives, you would have gone down to 0 claves in that spot for a card draw? Because isn't going down to 0 claves potentially just a little bit scary?
It just means I can't mark him again, which means my next Saber Bloodshed won't draw a card. But then I'm drawing a card for this Saber Bloodshed, so it immediately makes up for the next one not drawing a card. And then life totals are getting low enough that I'm not like you said. There's one Take Out the Mantle left in my deck. Um,
Yeah, because you played 2.
there's just not that much left that
Yeah,
I need to mark him for.
right.
But
And
against
that's
slower decks,
Mhm.
I am more concerned about that. But that's why we play up sticks and run against the slower decks to be able to pick up our Hunter's Slaves.
and that's sort of the other benefit of also going down on Mark of the Black Widows, right? It's like you can actually go down to 0 claves sometimes because you only mark payoffs to Saber Bloodsheds and Take Up the Mantles at that point. I guess in this case you had a couple of blue Mark of the Black Widows, but I mean they're blue, so you don't super care about those. So you can be a little more free with how you flick your mark.
Yeah. One concern that of not having a Hunter's Clave is you become potentially fatigable. But I'm up so many cards on putting, and Aurora doesn't block well enough to threaten to fatigue you. The only way Aurora can really fatigue you is if you're blocking a ton and she just fatigues you by damage.
Yeah. And also, I mean, Kallistra in the end game as well. I mean, it's like a Kodachi. It's like a worse Kodachi in a sense because it does still get go again from Slippy's ability, even if opponent's not marked, right? As you pointed out earlier.
Yeah. Yeah, it does.
Okay. Now this turn, you've putting in such a fork here, right? You start with the Kiss of Death. You're holding 2 cards. I think he has seen 2 toxins though. You have played 2 toxins so far, so. I mean, but he's sort of at the point where unless he has a D-react, really he can't just block this for like 6 or something. He kind of just has to hope you don't have it. And that's exactly what he does, and you don't have it, which is one of those slippy hands that happens sometimes.
Yeah. And I think that blocking 6 you can't win no matter what, basically. So you just kind of have to block 3 and hope for the best.
Yep, which is what he does. And then Infiltrate comes in, and here's where you were talking about how Aurora doesn't block very well. And yeah, Pudding doesn't have a 3 block in his hand. So again, he's just stuck. He's like kind of stuck here. You can give up 2 cards here, all let the on hit through, but then you're very likely going to get a 0 for 4 and also deal more deck damage, in which case you can block more on your turn. So, I mean, it's exactly what you were saying, right? Why you chose Slippy for this meta is, at least for into Aurora, it's like they just can't stop your detrimental on hits. And we saw that happen in Art of Desire Body. We're seeing that happen now. Once the armor is gone, it's just very, very difficult for them to deal with this.
Mm-hmm. And I think this is kind of like the turn that Pudding blocked 2 pieces of armor on my Hunter's Clave. I was very happy that he did that. And this is the spot where if he had just 1 block on 1 piece of armor left, he could save a whole card by blocking with that armor.
Yeah, and on that turn, I guess he was stopping the mark, which ended up not mattering, I believe, right? On that turn. Yeah, because you went Clave into Leave No Witnesses, and the Leave No Witnesses hit because all he did was block in Providence. So it didn't end up mattering, but it's also hard for him to know that at that point, right? Because, again, he, like you, also hadn't seen any Saber Bloodsheds, although maybe he doesn't know you're running them, because it was a bit of a unique innovation, at least in your list, and wasn't common amongst all Slippies.
Yeah, yeah. And this is one of the other wonderful things of Saber Bloodshed is it buffs Kiss of Death. He's marked, so if the Kiss of Death hits, I'll draw a card. And then if I ever have Tarantula Toxins here, that's just like an unwinnable game state for your opponent.
Yeah, I absolutely love this playline as well. It was something I did on Mario, and it's kind of why I was trying to do that in New as well. I was like, surely if New can do the same thing, it'll just be better. So this time Pudding does have blocking cards, and also he did go ahead and Arsenal. So coming back to what you were saying earlier on in the beginnings of the game, do you expect that to be a defense reaction in his Arsenal?
No, I actually don't think it's a defense reaction.
Oh wait, yeah,
because I think
Of course, the
He
way
would
he
have blocked
blocked.
with it last
Yeah,
turn
never
instead of
mind. Yeah,
blocking
of
for
course.
4.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, no,
So,
that doesn't make any sense. Of course, yeah, because he gave you 2 cards on that. So scratch that. But he's blocking 6 here, and you tank a little bit on this point, deciding whether you want to raise his edge right here. Can you talk about that decision?
yeah, so right now, if I draw Codex of Frailty and I don't cast Razor's Edge here, I'm going to pitch my Persuasive Prognosis, attack with Hunter's Clave, attack with Graphene, and then attack with Leave No Witnesses. And I probably win the game from there, even if I just discard this Razor's Edge to Codex of Frailty. But if I play Razor's Edge here, he goes to 2, and then suddenly he has to block the Hunter's Clave and block the Graphene, or he's in big trouble. Or alternatively, he plays a D-React on this Razor's Edge, and that means my Leave No Witness is not getting D-Reacted, which is going to kill his arsenal that we know is not a D-React from the previous turn.
Yeah.
Or we suspect is not a D-React from the previous turn.
Yeah. And you're still going to draw because you have 2 daggers that are coming in. So it's not like you're giving that up either.
So I paused because I'm like, I didn't give him a window to somersault. I want to let him somersault before I attack with the thing. But I feel very, very confident at this point in the game.
Yeah, for sure. I think this is the I don't say beginning of the end. I think you sort of pulled ahead on your Mask of Perdition turn. But I think actually I think this might be the end of the game. And then so the Kallistra draws you Pain in the Backside, which is I think one of the few ways you could convert this entire hand. I think you would have been forced to arsenal one of the cards if it was just like another stealth card.
Yeah.
But,
which is fine.
Yeah, which is totally fine.
The card here, but
yeah, because you'd be taking his entire hand. So,
yeah, it's nice. I can just convert this into 4 in a spot where it's very likely to be worth 4.
Exactly.
Or 5, because I should actually target the Kiss of Death with this, which would put him to 1. But I just made another mistake here, where I felt like I was winning no matter what, and I just got a little sloppy. But
right. And
fortunately, it does not matter.
Yeah, the game ends there anyways. So, got your W at round 2 of World Tour London over there. So yeah, congrats on that. Any thoughts looking back at the game aside from anything that came up? Aside from specific play lines that we already went through? Any like overarching thoughts? Anything else you want to bring up regarding that game?
Yeah, overall, I think this is like kind of a good illustration of why I think the matchup is quite good for Slippy. I talked a lot about Codex of Frailty being the reason that I wanted to play Slippy, and I didn't draw a single Codex of Frailty that game, did it? And that it wasn't Slippy's fault. I think almost every turn I was set up that if I drew Codex of Frailty, I could cast it, which is great. That's where I want to be, and I just didn't draw them. So, but still, the power of like Infiltrate and Art of Desire, both of them looked quite good in that game, hitting very impactful things. The Infiltrate's hitting the Shelter and the Channel Lightning Valley, and then the Art of Desire drawing 2 cards combined with the Mask. Just those are the reasons that I think that Slippy is quite favored into Aurora, and that's just kind of like I guess I feel like that game was a good illustration of those things.
Yeah, you didn't even resolve Codex, but you still got there in a way that seemed fairly convincing at the end there. You're basically a full turn cycle ahead of putting on that turn since you sent your last card in. He had no cards remaining as he died. And I think the way you played around Codex of Frailty the entire game, it's actually fascinating. That's not something I have heard people talk about very much. But yeah, as you were saying, every turn of the game you were set up to resolve a Codex. And I think that's a very valuable insight that anyone looking to pick up Slippy and maybe even other assassins should be thinking about constantly.
Yeah, I'd say I'm a little bit traumatized from my new games. And one thing that happened with new too is at Arsenal I do react. I'm like, we can clear this from the Arsenal. It's fine. We'll just block anything my opponent does. And they go, Exude.
Oh my God.
And I'm like, I look at my Codex in hand. I'm like, I'm going to have to block with a stupid thing. And it's so bad. But
that literally happened to me a few days ago. But yeah.
Yeah, it happened enough that I quit playing new. So, yeah, I think Codex is it's probably the most powerful card in the game right now. Maybe Wildfire, but like the most powerful like regular math card in the game. And just setting yourself up to be able to cast it anytime you draw it, I think gives you a great chance of winning games with Assassin.
Right. Well, Michael, thank you so much for coming on and giving us and the viewers and listeners your super valuable insight. Before we sign off, I just want to give you the chance to let the people know where they can find you, your Twitter handle, everything.
Uh, I'm on, I'm not really using Twitter very much anymore. I was at Hadesblade on Twitter, and now I'm on Blue Sky, though I don't check that very often either. And I think the best way to actually reach me is I made a Metafy account. And I'm doing a little bit of coaching on there, and I plan to start posting some written content that's going to be free. Um, I've been saying that for like 2 months now, so hopefully I do it soon. But if you want to reach out to me, you can either tag me on Blue Sky at Hades or whatever the Blue Sky thing is, Hades Blade at Blue Sky, whatever, or find me on Metafy, same thing, Hades Blade.
Okay, so yeah, on Hades Blade. Oh, sorry, on Metafy, it's also your Twitter handle. All right. Cool. Awesome. Thank you again for coming on. And that was episode 3 of Replay Narcissus with the Pros. Hope you all enjoyed it. Let us know in the comments what you thought about that. And we will see you in the next one.